we'll start with a couple of questions about one of the biggest issues facing Long Beach and plenty of other cities right now, which is homelessness. So we want to hear from each of you what you think the root causes of homelessness are, and how do you propose the city address that in a way that it hasn't done it in the past. So Rex, we'll start with you this time.
Sure. The issue of homelessness is incredibly important to me. I moved around a lot as a kid, as I mentioned, and it was largely because we were housing insecure. We moved where we found jobs and housing that was affordable. And right now, that's half the city residents of our city spend more than 50% or more of their income on housing. And so to address the issue of homelessness, I have a plan called the HOPE plan. It's really 4 parts. H is for housing. We can't talk about homelessness without also talking about housing and our capacity to build shelter to deal with the homelessness. And we haven't kept pace with housing production since the loss of redevelopment in 2013, where we used to invest $25 to $30 million a year in preservation and production of affordable housing. So I want to propose that we build housing near schools and near colleges, and we identify a dedicated social resident to do so. The second part is outreach. I was out about 3 weeks ago with our reach teams conducting outreach. We need to do more outreach, but also when you talk to someone 10 or 15 times and they finally say, hey, I'm ready to come off the street, they're on a list for 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So we have to build capacity to make sure that our outreach is successful and we have a place for people to go. P is for pathways. We need to have pathways for people off the streets, but also pathways into home ownership. Buying a home at 25 was one of the most significant decisions I've ever made, but I had help. I had down payment assistance from the federal government. We need to restore down payment assistance in the city, an effort I'm already doing to make sure Long Beach renters have an opportunity to own a home, and our city employees can buy a home in our city. And then last is E, which is expanding mental health services. We're unique to have our own health department in the city of Long Beach that allows us to have a local response to health crisis, which is what the homeless emergency is. We need to expand into mental health. Some would say that this is not possible due to state legislation, which I will tell you, it is absolutely possible through an MOU with our county. And I've already worked with, I'm supported by 3 of 5 of our county board of supervisors. I've spoken with all 3 of them about exploring the opportunity to build a deeper partnership with the county to do more mental health services locally in our city. Thank you.
And do you need us to restate the question for you, Susie?
Oh, you're on mute, Susie.
There we go.
There we go. No, I'm good. I don't need the question repeated. Thank you. So this is obviously one of our biggest challenges in the city of Long Beach. While cities around us saw a decline in homelessness, we saw an increase of 62%. We now have 3,300 people living on the streets, or some of whom are sheltered, but not sheltered long-term. And I appreciate that Mr. Richardson has been on a ride-along in the last 8 years, but I do this for a living. I've been a prosecutor for 23 years. I currently oversee our recidivism and mental health unit. I've been on numerous ride-alongs right here in the city of Long Beach, but I've also been on ride-alongs. I do them every day. I sit as the proxy for the district attorney on the Commission to End Homelessness in another county. And I'm working with the healthcare agency on a program that I helped architect called First Point that was deployed earlier this year. I can tell you that housing is not the solution to homelessness. It's one part of the solution. But when we look at our homeless population, we have about a third who are financially unstable, and working with the city to provide resources such as housing vouchers and traditional housing is the option that is available. And really, that's the easiest population for us to work with because all services are voluntary. There is nothing that's compulsory yet, and nothing will be compulsory until CARES Court rolls out in January of 2024 in LA County, which is quite a bit away. But what the number one effective way to get people connected to services, those suffering from mental health, substance abuse, or a co-occurring disorder, is through robust street outreach. The 10 to 15 times that Councilman Richardson just talked about in the city of Long Beach right now takes over a year because we don't have consistent daily outreach. If we have consistent daily outreach, we can connect people to services and lean on our nonprofits to expand their role and help us build our capacity in the city of Long Beach, something that we have not been doing well and something that we have huge potential to do in the coming years.
So we'll get to the rebuttal first. I mean, we will get to the rebuttal, but I just want to give you like another 30 seconds just to clarify, like what, so are you saying that we need to do outreach? What are we not doing now that the city can do to better address what's going on in the city?
Sure, we have
homelessness?
Sure, we have limited outreach teams right now. The number one way to connect people to services is through building a relationship based on dignity and respect. And you cannot do that if you go out today, you don't go out for another month, and the person doesn't remember that they have a positive association with you. So the model that is utilized in street outreach today is a daily consistent model for a 2-week period of time, where the relationship is based on respect and dignity, and offers of help are given where someone is showing up for you. Research shows that day 8 of 10, people do accept a service in that situation.
Okay, well, you have a minute for your rebuttal if you wish, correct?
Thanks, Jason. So a few things. So first, homelessness, we've been focused on homelessness since before it was a citywide crisis. We had an emergency along the LA River. We have multiple sort of jurisdictions, LA County flood, Southern California Edison, where you clean up an encampment and folks just jump the fence and go to the other side. And so we've been dealing with this for quite some time. I've been doing ride-alongs for about 12 years. What I can tell you is there is a philosophical difference between the two of us. When the homeless crisis really grew citywide, my opponent's first approach was to hire a special prosecutor to prosecute those panhandling in Belmont Shore and push them to the other communities. And the reality is we have to address root causes. We need to think about building our own local capacity to deal with homelessness. That's why I stepped forward to build the city's first municipal homeless shelter, because Martin v. Boise said you couldn't enforce your anti-camping laws unless you actually had capacity to do services and housing. And so by doing so, it inspired the city to do more. We now have 3 Project Room Key sites in all parts of town after we built the Atlantic Bridge community, and we just acquired the Luxury Inn to build a 4th. We have to build our own capacity to deal with these issues. Thank you.
Susie, do you want to, and before, if you do want to respond to that, I will say, just for context, that during your time on the council, you have authored a number of items focused on a variety of issues, around homelessness, whether it be like the bike shop ordinance, or I know when we talked about it the other day, you said it was not called the panhandling ordinance, but it was, go ahead and respond to that.
Sure. So first of all, the first council member on the City of Long Beach, current city council, that ever brought an item on homelessness was me in 2017. It was entitled Comprehensive Approach to Homelessness. And it involved every single innovative idea that's being used throughout the country. Homeless work programs, interdepartmental teams to work together. So this thing that the first thing we did was hire a neighborhood impact prosecutor is just baloney, and it's a flat out lie. Now, we did hire a neighborhood impact prosecutor, but not to prosecute panhandling. Panhandling is not illegal. Anybody who knows the law would understand that. What we hired the neighborhood impact prosecutor to do was to make sure that violations of the California law and local ordinances are followed up upon by the prosecutor when an arrest is made. Not to make arrests, but when an arrest is made, have a special dedicated prosecutor. And that outreach was effective. And in fact, the city council, the entire city council, just funded a neighborhood impact prosecutor, including Councilman Richardson, who voted for it.
Well, there is a new state law that was recently signed by the governor, CARES Court. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. If you guys are watching at home, it basically allows cities now or a variety of people to, if somebody's having a mental health issue or a drug addiction issue, they, in so many words, a court can force them into a treatment plan. Now, prior to the governor's signing of that, our city council, you guys, asked for options of how to implement it locally. So my question is are you guys supportive of CARE Court? And, given the ask about options for implementing it locally, if it is allowed, how do you think it should be tailored here in Long Beach if that becomes a reality? And I think the first is Susie.
Thank you, Jason. I think there's a lot of misinformation about CARES Court. So CARES Court is going to roll out in Orange County in January of 2023. I'm already at the table on those discussions. It'll roll out in LA County in January 2024. The standard for CARES Court is a very high standard. It's the 5150 standard. So about 80% of those experiencing mental health issues that are living on the streets today will not qualify for a CARES Court referral, because CARES Court standard is someone is a danger to themselves or others years, which would traditionally require a 72-hour hold, but now it's going to allow a court to compel services for someone up to 2 years. But again, the threshold is the 5150 standard. So CARES Court is not the solution that a lot of people think it's going to be to compel people into services. Even with CARES Court, the number one way to get people into services is through developing a relationship based on trust and dignity and respect, because it's still going to be a voluntary service. Now, under CARES Court, police officers will be added to the category of individuals who can refer those that they encounter directly to the courts for consideration of CARES Court, which is a type of conservatorship. Of course, Long Beach needs to be part of the CARES Court rollout. I'm concerned about whether the funding that the state has set aside for CARES Court is sufficient to address all 58 counties' needs. And so we'll get to learn some of those lessons with the rollout in the first year. I believe there's 8 or 9 counties that'll be rolling out in January, and we'll be able to watch best practices and lessons learned so that when it rolls out in Long Beach in January of 2024, we'll be in a position to be able to implement it, having the benefit of the lessons learned from the other counties and knowing what additional funding will be required. It's a great step in the right direction, but it is not a cure-all for the issue of homelessness that many people think it is.
Okay. What are your feelings on the new legislation, Rex?
Sure, I'm optimistic about it. I know that our systems, particularly our court systems, are difficult for families to navigate, even if you have resources. I know this personally. My younger brother, so when we moved here, you know, a lot of us went to school, and I got a college acceptance letter when I was 17 and go to Cal State Dominguez Hills, and it changed my life. But my brother had a different experience. When he turned 17, he was shot in the back and, you know, airlifted to Long Beach Memorial, and he survived, but he had real trauma. And, you know, he ended up being a, substance user on opioids, and eventually affected his life. And so he's one of the chronic homeless people, homeless individuals with chronic mental health issues. Now, our family has had a difficult time helping him to make the right decisions to come off the street and accept help and support. And we have resources. And imagine if you're a family without resources, it's difficult to navigate. So a court that can help families in this situation, because a lot of people on the street, their brothers and sisters, they have families that could help if they could make the right decision. And so I'm optimistic about it. But I would say that it's not the final solution. I go back to, we have to build our own capacity to deal with it. I believe that we have to invest in mental health services in our communities so it's easy to navigate. You may have a crisis on a school campus, you may have a crisis in the household, but who do you call? It's difficult. You may get 5 or 6 numbers, but in our city, we don't give one number to call, one resource that tells you how to identify a challenge before it's too late. And so we have to build that capacity. My whole plan talks about that: housing, outreach, pathways, and expanding mental health services locally in our communities. And that's what we're going to do as mayor.
All right.
Haley?
Yeah, so moving on to